right, thank you for coming back and on time, and we're going to stay on time so I don't get yelled at from Lauren again. So my name's Jamie. I'm going to go into some of the studies that some of the doctors touched on yesterday. Our company's Green Sun Medical. We make the Whisper brace, and I'm going to give you some of the insight of like why we wanted to do that. And then the real topic for this is these incredible women right here who are relentless advocates for their children. And it's not just scoliosis. I'll go into some introductions, but it also applies to other pediatric orthopedic conditions. The brace study. Raise your hand if you guys know what the brace study is. Some, but not all. So this put scoliosis bracing, it legitimized it. This is the gold standard paper. This was published in 2013 in the New England Journal of Medicine. It was funded by the National Institutes of Health. They did a randomized study, hundreds of kids, 25 sites. 1/3 of the kids did not get braces and 2/3 did. And so they eventually published it in the New England Journal of Medicine, and this was a true randomized clinical trial. Because until that point, there had never been a true trial, and they said, okay, does bracing really work? They had stopped school screenings recommendations by the U.S. Preventative Task Force because there wasn't any evidence, and they said they were x-raying too many kids, and if they had scoliosis and were going to get surgery anyway, they'd get discovered later. So they did this randomized trial. Partway into the trial, they stopped the non-bracing arms because those kids were progressing to surgery at a much higher rate, and it was unethical to continue. It then was published. It was the first level 1 evidence. This justified it for insurance. This made the pendulum swing because you had all these doctors out there. They were like, yeah, I think bracing works, but then, the kid's complaining. Do I really want to fight them? After this, everything started to change, and it became unethical to not prescribe bracing. But some of the data that was in there was like, okay, bracing works. And I'll go into the actual study if they wear it. Your kid doesn't do any good with a brace if it's under their bed. So you've got to be a relentless advocate to make sure your kids wear your brace and as many hours a day. They went back and got another grant, and they created the braced calculator. So this website, if you look up brace-calc, you can find it. They made it kid-friendly, and so you can go in, launch the calculator, and you can do different variables. So if you have an 11-year-old girl with a 30-degree curve, RISR 1, 5 foot tall, 87 pounds, she has a 61% chance of progressing to a surgical indication if she doesn't wear her brace. And then you hit the click here button, and then you can start dialing it in. Okay, if she hits 12 hours a day wearing her brace, that drops down to 20%. If she makes it all the way to 18 hours a day, it drops to 9%. Bracing works. Get good in-brace correction and get good compliance, and you've got a really good chance. It doesn't work 100% of the time. There are curves. You could put a kid in a vise for 5 years, and that curve is still going to progress. There's some battles that you're not going to win, but a lot of the battles you can win if the more hours you get are better in a brace. So when we started our company, we wanted to say, okay, can we improve some of the compliance and address some of the issues? We're trying to apply corrective pressure, but we wanted to be able to make sure the kids were flexible, kind of have some freedom of motion. We wanted to be unrestricted in breathing and eating because that was one of the complaints from kids. We wanted it to have lower temperature with an open design, and then we wanted continuous corrective pressure. And we wanted to improve compliance, and most importantly, we heard from a lot of parents is we wanted a better relationship between them. Like, I'm tired of fighting with my kid. One of the things we did, you'll see a lot of compliance monitoring starting to hit the market or is already in the market. I think this is critical. You've got to know that they're wearing it. There's different heat sensors that you can get called eye buttons where they can check. Dr. Johnson was talking about it yesterday with Scottish Rite Hospital. So they put a sensor in all their braces. A lot of places do. And you can get this report card. Kids do better if they're going to get a report card or if they have to take a test. the Scottish Rite group, I talked to the doctor that did the study down there. What she didn't mention is they did a separate blind study with these kids, and they surveyed the adults, or the parents, the orthotist, the doctor, and the kid on how many hours of compliance they were doing it, and compared it to the eye buttons. Everybody was wrong, 100%. Some people overestimated their hours, maybe parents and kids. The orthotist was relatively close, and I think the doctors underestimated it. But if you can get that sort of monitoring and find out what's going on, it gives you a really good idea of what they're doing. So we knew it was important to do monitoring. We went and applied to the National Science Foundation for a grant. We've received $1.8 million in grants because we wanted to add another level with pressure sensors on it. So we've got a 12 sensor pad that we're tracking compliance, and we're going to be tracking actual pressure on the kids, because we want to make sure it's not just being worn, but is it being worn properly, and gather that evidence. The big thing is there's some apps out there right now that can do this, and we're adding ours. We want to be able to show these kids positive rewards. Hey, we're close to hitting our hours, and we're tracking down to the 10th of an hour. We want to be able to have these kids see how many hours a day they're wearing it. There's some reward buttons we have in there. It's all about how many days a row can you do it, and how many hours in a row did you wear it. The more positive feedback you can give your kids, the better it is. We're also setting up a dashboard for the physicians so they can quickly check all of their kids. Orthotists really like this too, because they send you and your kids off into the world, and they often don't see it for 3 months. Even if they have a monitor on it, they don't scan it when they get back. They like to see in real time. So it's important to stay checked in with your orthotist. Make sure you're getting those scans when you come in if you have an eye button, and track that compliance. We have a couple young ladies here that we're starting to connect with the app who are little rock stars that I've had the pleasure to get to know. What we're really trying to do is, like, we wanted to make a sleek brace, but it's not that. We're trying to figure out the autopilot. Like, how much pressure do you really need? We have this one big study, the brace study, and it shows 18 hours a day, but it was also with heat sensors. We want to figure out, is there a maximum amount of pressure you can put on these kids for a minimum amount of time? Because I think in the future, you're going to see not just us, but multiple companies show, hey, you actually need this much pressure, this many hours a day, and then at a point, you can start weaning kids off. One of the things Dr. Johnson mentioned is they haven't really studied the back end. The kids end up 13, 14. The wean time is not standardized throughout the industry. Some people stop bracing right away. Some people tell you 6 months or 9 months of night time. I think it has to be studied in depth to see that these kids get if they've done a really good job, you don't want to see them lose 5 or 10 degrees right at the end of bracing. And we're hoping to gather some of that evidence and actually help provide it to some of the people. So I talked about relentless advocacy for your kids, which is why I brought some of these parents up. One of my favorite people, and I love all these kids, but I tell you, a person that actually mentally saved me. So middle of COVID, I think we're going bankrupt. Like, you can't raise money for a new brace, and I wasn't there, and this was in St. Louis. I get a video from my team, and it was this young lady. Can you hear it? I can't hear it. They can't hear it. Huh? It's not playing the sound. Yeah, she's giggling, I promise. So if you've seen our website. So I was like, okay. There we go. I still don't hear it. It's all right. So she was wiggling and giggling. I was like, okay, we got something. So I watched this young lady grow up, and let me tell you, I have never felt tall, but I never really felt short till I started working in this field, because I watch all these young ladies grow up and get taller than me. Her mom, Katherine, is joining us here, and she is a relentless advocate for her child, and they've joined us at some conferences. And Emmy, after 7 years of bracing, just finished up. And I think I got a good brace. She actually wanted to stop wearing it. I thought it was kind of crazy, but she actually was like, no, I'm never wearing a brace again. But she did a great job, and I think she did a great job. She took it on herself. She's a powerful young woman. She's going to be up on a panel this afternoon talking about her mom and some of the tricks her mom gave you that she can share with you. But also, I wanted this panel to be about them and the tricks they've done. So with that, we've got some great parents, and they've got some unique stories of how they ended up in their process and where they went. Kim McCann is joining us. She's a relentless advocate because of her own journey that was very interesting. I was like, you would be great to talk on this panel. Katherine Sweeney is Emmy's mom. She's started a podcast and helps out a lot with parent and patient advocacy. Tammy Uktek, if you guys were here last year, you probably saw her and Sweat as one of the group leaders. She's done really good, and I love her story about don't even try bracing. You're going to be a surgical candidate right now. And then Maureen Hoff is Director of Patient and Parent Advocacy at Orthopediatric Specialty Bracing. She's mainly in the clubfoot department in there. She is a relentless advocate. She's the clubfoot mom. If you look her up in social media, she has a podcast that's incredible. This episode she just had a few weeks ago or a month or two ago, her daughter just finished 5 years of clubfoot treatment. And there was a little bit of withdrawal, like, wow, this has been like so much part of my life. What am I doing now? And it was at the exact same time Katherine's daughter finished bracing. So if your daughters are right at that tail end, or sons, I would encourage you to listen to that one. So they each kind of have their own journey, and I think as much as we've got talking heads like me up here, and you've got these experts from great clinical institutions, these are the true experts who've been through years of advocating for their child. So with that, I'd like them all to kind of share their story, starting with Kim, and go ahead.
So my name is Kim McCann. Let me turn this on.
Yep. Hang on one second. Is it working?
Hello.
Yeah, there you go.
There we go. My name is Kim McCann. I'm from Michigan. And my daughter is Kinley. You may have tried some of her delicious cookies. Thank you, she's sold out. She's like, next year I'm gonna have to bring more. So that's Kinley. She's 10 years old. She is an amazing little girl. She was diagnosed with scoliosis at age 7, which wasn't even on our radar. I love hearing all the stories of how everyone got diagnosed because they're all different, and I don't think anybody was expecting it for the most part. So we just went into a 7-year well check. She bent over as she was told to, and then the doctor said, bend over again. Okay, so she did. She said, do you see that, Mom? And now no, I don't. I see my daughter bending over, but what are you having me look at? She's like, well, look at her right side. It's up higher than her left. That's a marker for scoliosis. So I want you to leave here and go to the imaging center. Now, this is in 2021. So we're just getting out of COVID and all of that, but healthcare was still a little bit iffy at the time getting into places. But we did get in. We got the x-ray done, and then I was called, I think the same day, yes, you have scoliosis. It's mild right now. It was 14 or 15 degrees at the worst curve. So we're going to refer you down to a specialist. Okay, so that's how she got diagnosed. But I want to tell you a little bit about me because this changes the course and how I'm taking care of my daughter now. So for me, in my late teens, early 20s, I do not have scoliosis, but I had different health issues, and I didn't know what it was for 5-6 years. Some of the symptoms were very low blood sugar. I got in multiple car accidents because I couldn't see. I would see like 5 roads instead of 1 because of the blurred vision. I would pass out at work. I would go to bed at night and not wake up until 5 p.m. the next day because my sugar was so low. If any of you know anything about blood sugar levels, you want to keep it around 80 to 100. Every morning I would wake up, I would be in the low double digits, like 10, 15. Now those are levels that are so low that it puts some people into comas. Mine, since it was happening over a period of time, where it might have been in the 50s when I first started getting low blood sugar, my body kind of adjusted to it, then 40s, and now I'm in the low teens, and it was really affecting my health. I also did not have health insurance at the time, and you get treated differently in hospitals when you don't have health insurance. It's just the sad truth of the way it is here. And so I would get treated, they'd get my blood sugar back up, release me, I'd go see doctors, they'd be like, yeah, you have low blood sugar, you just need to eat more. And I will say that I was 50 pounds heavier then than I am now because I was eating so much trying to keep my sugar level up. I would wake up and chug orange juice. I was in college at the time, and I walked around with a half gallon of orange juice just to make it through the college day. And I would tell doctors this. I can see in the looks on all of your faces, it's very concerning. You think it would be concerning to a doctor? I did too, but it wasn't. I would just get treated and sent home. I was very near death several times until I started dating my now husband. But he saw me when we moved in together, and he's like, this is really concerning. I've got a brother who's diabetic, but you're kind of the opposite with your sugar, but he knew how serious it was, and he took me seriously. He was the first person that took me seriously. So the internet was kind of a baby at that time. We're in the late, before 2010. But he went out there and looked for medical research, and he started becoming my advocate. I kind of sadly gave up hope at that point. This is just my life now. And you kind of get into that rut of, I'm just going to have to learn how to deal with things the way they are. I don't know what I can do. But he found a medical study of people who were just like me, and he said, I think this sounds like you. We need to go see an endocrinologist, and we need to see if this is what you have. So I'm reading it, and I started crying because even though it was just a paper he printed off the internet, it was something that connected to me, and I never had that before. Kind of like being at Higgy Con, how a lot of our kids feel. I'm like, yes, this absolutely sounds like me. And what he found was, it was called an insulinoma, which is a tumor on your pancreas, most of the time benign. But this tumor is a little insulin-producing machine. So it was constantly spitting insulin out into my bloodstream, making my sugar drop, and then I would eat to try to get it back up, and then my natural system of insulin would kick back on. And so it's like I would eat, and I'd get twice as much insulin. So it was in this constant battle of just staying conscious. So we went to the endocrinologist. She said, yes, I think you're absolutely right. I think you do have a tumor. Sent me for a CT scan. It was confirmed. It was a very large tumor. Normally these tumors are like pea size, blueberry size. Mine was the size of an egg, which is why I was having so many terrible issues. And she said, because of the size of it, I'm worried that it's metastasizing, but we won't know until we get it out. So I had to wait another 6 weeks before they could get me in for surgery. And they called me and said, we have a cancellation, we can get you in tomorrow, but before the surgery you need to fast for 24 hours, which would have killed me. So we're gonna have you come in an extra day early, and we're gonna have you fast so that your stomach's empty, but we're gonna put you on an IV to feed you sugar so you don't die. Okay, great. So as I'm running around the house packing because I need to leave now, I called both of my jobs that I was working. I'm not coming in, I'm gonna be off for at least a couple months. This is gonna put me on bed rest for a while. I'm just adding in this tidbit because it's really romantic, and that's why I love my husband so much. He's like, I gotta run and make an errand real quick, and so now I'm like mad. But whatever, you go do it. I'm packing. He comes home, and he's nervous, and he's fidgeting, and I'm like, why aren't you helping me pack? What is the matter with you? Are you just nervous about my health? He's like, do you need something to put your jewelry in? I'm like, no, why would I take jewelry? I'm going for surgery. I don't need anything to put my jewelry in. Well, there might be one thing you need to take with you. What could I possibly need to take with me? What about this ring? And he proposed to me. Now everybody cried. And so I believe in the power of positive thinking impacting your health. He said, I don't want you going into the surgery thinking, I have cancer, I'm gonna die, all gloom and doom. I want you going in there thinking about our marriage, our wedding, our life together, and that's what our future is going to be. And so I did that. I was in the hospital in the ICU for 2 weeks as I was recovering, and then on bed rest for another couple months. And I'm completely healthy now. I could go all day without eating if I have no sugar issues. The tumor was removed. It was benign. They took part of my pancreas with it. They took my spleen with it just because they thought it could be cancer, and if it was, it would have spread to the spleen. Took all of that out, but I live a completely healthy, normal life now. But not having a spleen, I got to go get booster shots like a baby every few years, but I'm okay with that. I can handle the shots. So that background is important because then we got married and had our own children, and now I've got a daughter with scoliosis, which is a life-altering diagnosis, not life-threatening in most cases, but life-altering. So we went on the normal course, went to the doctor that we were referred to, went on the normal path of treatment, and she was responding very well. When she was 8 years old, she got braced. Boston was doing great brace, but she started to have some things going on while she was bracing that I wasn't happy with as a parent. So her mental health was starting to suffer, and especially as she's growing and changing, I didn't want her to hate this body that she's in, to hate this brace that she's in. It was concerning for me to see how much anxiety and sadness and restriction she felt in her brace. But there was really no other option. I know the brace works. I know it works. So you have to do it. And she understood that, so she complied. And that's just the path that we were on. until actually shortly before Higgy Con last year. I was researching nonstop like I do. I found out about the Whisper brace online, and I'm like, this seems like it could solve a lot of the dislikes that she has about her current brace. One being the flexibility. She was starting to get muscle atrophy in her midsection after she braced for a couple years. So that was concerning to me. She's a gymnast. She's losing some of the things she could do, she couldn't do after she wore the brace for a couple years. So I didn't really like that. She was really hot in it all the time. That was another complaint. And then when she went to school, already having this big thing on, she didn't feel like a normal kid, but she said, I can't sit down during circle time. I can't. There are certain things on the playground, I don't remember what she said now, but my brace restricts me, so I either have to take it off or just not do the things that other kids are doing. So I already know this is a life-altering thing for you. If I can make some of these complaints go away where you're going to be happy to be in this thing until it's done, I'm going to do that for you. And so then I relentlessly started pushing for the Whisper. My doctor at the time, she said, we know this works. I don't know anything about the Whisper. And so this is just the way we do things here. If you're going to be a patient here, we're going to just continue with the Boston because that's what I know and that's what I'm comfortable with, which I totally respected. And I said, I respect that, but I still really want this for her. Is there any way that you can just write me the prescription for the TLSO brace and I can take it to a different orthotist and have them monitor the brace since you're not comfortable with it? We went back and forth for several weeks until finally they said, since that's the direction you want to go is the Whisper, we're going to have to release you from our care and you're going to have to find a doctor that will support that. So then you kind of feel like a failure, like I just got fired from my doctor's office. But then, after a breakup, you're like, you know what? Life is actually better now because I'm free. So before we found another doctor, I'm like, now is my opportunity. She had a brace that fit her well. We've got all these months before we need another x-ray or any treatment. Now's my chance to interview the doctor's offices and find one that fits because I just went to the one that was given to me before and now I get to choose my next relationship. So I asked lots of people their opinions. I talked to lots of doctor's offices. I asked Jamie for some referrals. And actually, the one we ended up with was one that one of his people had met in person and said really good things about. The doctor's just very open-minded and willing to try new things and really has good patient etiquette. So we met with him, love him. We get in there and we'll be in his room for an hour. We're his only patient when we're in there. It doesn't matter what he's got on the schedule, we're the only patient. He's like, yeah, I've never heard of this Whisper thing, but sure, I love to learn, I'm willing to try. So Jamie flew someone in to meet with my doctor, train him on the brace. We got my daughter in the brace, and she is doing phenomenal. And all of her complaints are gone that she had with her other brace, and she is very compliant. We just got the sensor put in, and she's super excited about it. She's got it on her phone. She's opening it up and trying to check it today. She was always really compliant, but just having those rewards in there for something she's already doing just kind of re-emphasizes the good behavior. So she'll be rewarded for it, and we're very excited to be continuing on this journey for bracing and hopefully avoid surgery in the future. Thank you.
So I have to add to that story that she's a little tiger, right? And like we said, oh, we're gonna bring cookies to our booth, and then told her daughter last year at Higgy Con, and then Lauren's like, you can't do that. They actually don't let you bring in outside food. And this girl's like, where's my cookies? And like, I did not want to get caught in a back alley with this young lady. And also, she was too small for it at that time. And so it was like, holy cow. And then we kind of reconnected, and she's like, well, she's grown a couple inches. I'm like, thank you, because I do not want to go to Higgy Con and face that little girl again. So this one, I feel a little more safe for myself and my family at this conference. I was like, I don't want her to be on her bad side. So she's a little tiger. So there you go. Katherine.
Hi.
Yep, pull the button.
Are we, there we go. Right. Hi, so I'm Katherine Sweeney, and my daughter Emmy is the little giggle girl that you saw there in the video. And that moment was about a little over 3.5 years into her bracing journey. So she was diagnosed at age 7 because she had back pain. There were no bend-over checks at our pediatrician, so fun fact, that's not consistent across all doctors, at all ages, or in schools. So So she had back pain, and our chiropractor was like, she's a super active kid, like super active kid. She was the one climbing the walls trying to jump off of something and kill herself from the age of like 10 months old. So very active kid. She shouldn't be having back pain like this. Let's just get an x-ray and just double check this. And then I got a call from the chiropractor at like 8 o'clock at that night. And she was like, Katherine, your daughter has scoliosis. And I was like, okay. And like, is it horrible? She was like, no, because you're calling me at 8 o'clock at night. And she was like, no, but you need to get her seen, like soon. And I said, okay, by who? And she goes, a specialist. And I was like, what kind of specialist? And she goes, an orthopedic specialist. And I said, okay, who should I go to? And she said, I don't know. Because I live in kind of a smallish town in Missouri. And so she said, maybe ask your pediatrician. I said, okay. So I go to the pediatrician. I'm like, hey, my kid's got scoliosis apparently. Here's the x-ray. And my doctor's looking at it, and she's like, she does. And I'm like, okay, so who do I go to? And she goes, I don't know. And I was like, and she goes, did the chiropractor have an idea? And I said, no. And so apparently that is not uncommon. Not all your pediatricians and doctors know who exactly to send you to. So she said, okay, you should be an orthopedic specialist, probably pediatric. And I had no idea that was even a thing, so okay. And so she said, let's try Children's Mercy, which is where I live. That's just where everybody sends you, is up to Kansas City to Children's Mercy when they don't know what to do with you. So it was a call, and then, it's a few months before we can get in to see the doctor. I, in that time, this was 8, she's 15 now, she was 7 years old, and I don't want to do the math, but it's been a while. And I wasn't really aware of like Facebook groups and things like that at the time. So this whole time I'm just like researching, trying to find information, reading studies and stuff that make no sense to me. And so I get in there, I wasn't exactly sure what to ask, but the doctor came in, and he was just like, this is moderate scoliosis, and he told us what was going to happen, and he talked to me, and I'm not even sure he might have talked to Emmy at all, and by this point she's 8 years old, and she's just sitting there with this like wide-eyed look on her face, and then he's just like, any questions? Okay, thanks, bye. And just like leaves. Like, she's gonna wear this brace, it's gonna be this many hours a day, and that's what we're gonna do. Any questions? Okay, bye. In that like dismissive, it's great if you have questions, it's better if you don't type of it, on the way, a throwaway out the door. And I just was like, he didn't explain things. When I tried to get him to explain, he would just sort of repeat the same wording, and not on a level that my kid could understand, much less that would help me understand so I could explain it to her. He didn't engage with her at all. And we walked out of there, and Emmy, we left the office, and I didn't say anything, and we were walking down the hall, and Emmy said, Mommy, I didn't like that doctor. And I said, you know what? I didn't either. And so and that's the first time in my life that I had that thought of like, oh, okay, this is not the one. And so I went back to my pediatrician, and I was like, okay, so this is not going to work. I need you to find us someone else, because I don't know how to go to I don't know who else to go find. And so she was like, okay. And she went back in her things, and in her files, and she finds from some conference she had been to. She's like, well, I heard this guy speak at a conference, and he seemed pretty good, so you could go to him. And I'm like, okay. The first doctor was over 2 hours away. This doctor is over 3 hours away. Okay, make that appointment, get in. And it's like time's passing, right? And so with that one, I wasn't going to be able to get in for several months. And at this point, I at least know that like, okay, it's important. It's like, she's just sitting here in no brace. We've got to get something started. So I call that office, and I'm like, look, they said, my initial appointment said this, but she was diagnosed back in December. And we're now like she's only 8 years old, and I know though, I can't wait. I need you to get her in sooner. And I kind of kept calling, and I was like, is there a waiting list? And I sort of called back until they got us in. And so that's my other step. If they say you've got that's when I learned you don't have to just wait for 4 to 6 months to get in. Call, keep at it, be nice, that wins points. And I was like, okay, so this worked. So I got in, and we liked him a lot better. He talked to her, and he explained, what was going on with her spine in ways that she could understand and stuff. And he was like, you're going to wear this brace, and how many hours a day do you think you can wear it? And she was like, I don't know, because she's never tried it. And he was like, do we think we could do like 10 to 12 hours a day maybe? And she was like, sure. And that seemed kind of low to me, but whatever. So we got the brace, and it was a traditional Boston. And sorry, my story's long. It was a traditional Boston, and we had nothing but trouble from the start. It was just, the problem was it was not well made, but I didn't know anything. I didn't know that there was anything besides a Boston. I didn't know anything about how you know if it's well made or not or whatever. And she was just constantly having sore spots and like broken skin and rubbing, and it would twist and turn and just all the things. And he was like, this is the brace and this is the orthotist and stuff. And so I just went with what he said. I didn't know you could ask for something different or someone different. So after a while of doing that, her curves had progressed to like 38 degrees, and I think I'm gonna say like 32 and 38 degrees. And she was just constantly, it was a constant fight. Like, my kid was not the one who was like, okay, I'm gonna do this. It was a fight from the beginning. And part of that was because like half the people we know were like, oh my gosh, my grandma, my aunt, my uncle, my sister had this surgery and they can do anything. Their life is so great, because when you start really young, they're like, there's a really good chance that this is gonna progress to surgery. We just need to prepare you for that. My mission was, I don't want my kid to have surgery at all, period. And then I was like, and if I do have to have surgery, I want to put it off as long as possible so that we can have as few procedures as possible. Because when you start really young, there's a good chance you're gonna have to have more than one procedure. And I was just like, no. So I really dug in on that. And so my fear in that ended up being like me constantly being on her. Where's your brace? Where's your brace? Are you wearing your brace? Show me your brace. Is it on your body? I would hear that Velcro. Where's your brace? Is it on your body? And she'd be like, the little like knocking, and fine, mom, But it got to where I felt our relationship was just suffering. I was the face of the brace. We ended up going good cop, bad cop with my husband and I. He was the good cop and I was the bad cop. It was just like, it was not working. And it was just such a constant struggle. Her mental health was tanking. She would have anxiety attacks at school and at home because she couldn't take a deep breath and breathe. She had constant heat rash. We could not figure out a way to stop it. She couldn't move. She's a very active child. Everything felt like she was just constantly complaining that something was bothering her. And so I start looking out there and I'm like, what else is there? Her doctor's just like, well, maybe wear the brace 16 hours a day. And I'm like, okay, but this doesn't seem to be helping. So somewhere I read about a Boston 3D, where they 3D scan you and make it. And I was like, and they were saying how this was so much more comfortable. And I was like, oh, okay. All right, where do I and our doctor was like, well, we don't do that anywhere up here. Okay, so then I'm researching, and I find that the closest place to me that makes them is at Shriners in St. Louis, which was at the time with the roads almost 5 hours away. And so I was like, okay, so I'm thinking I'll make an appointment, I'll get a second opinion there just to see if they feel like we're on the same track and see if I can get this 3D brace. And I make the appointment and I go over there, and instantly everything felt better. The way the whole thing was run, they had an EOS machine, which they hadn't had at our first two places. It felt like it was just a smooth machine. They could have mental health people come down and talk to her. Their POPs, their orthotics was in the same building. I didn't have to go to 5 different places, like go here to get your x-ray, go here to see the doctor, go here, go to this building to see the orthotist, and then you're like and then, their systems aren't talking. That's what would happen before. Here, it was like all in the same building, and it was pretty seamless. And I didn't know places like that existed. And so both she and I were like, this is awesome. And then the doctor came in and he talked to her. He really talked to her. And he was explaining to her, like, here's the deal. What are we doing? And what's making you not want to wear your brace? And all these things like this. And then the orthotist was amazing. And so we just felt so happy that we stayed there. We got her in the 3D brace. This orthotist was incredible, which is the other thing. I had been so worried the whole time about the doctor, about having the best surgeon possible. I didn't really understand that having the best surgeon possible is very important when your kid is having surgery. What is probably your biggest thing to have along the way, in my opinion, is a really, really good orthotist. Because that orthotist is the one, and their skill, they are wearing something that your child has up against their body, pressing and reshaping their torso, which so many nerves, right? 24/7, practically, you know? And so this doctor asked her to get up to 18 hours a day, which she sort of did for a while. And then this brace was much more comfortable. And I think he even made her 2 braces because she was doing a lot of growing. And it was a lot more comfortable. She was able to wear it more. And it was like night and day difference in how, we were like, wow, this is so much better. Apparently the orthotist is important. And then, but after a while, right, it's been 3.5 years, which is longer than a lot of kids brace completely. She was kind of like, I don't think I can do this anymore, Mom. We were just at odds all the time because it was still like, wear your brace. Is it on your body? Where is your brace? I was the face of the brace, and I hated that. She didn't like me constantly nagging her. She was a gymnast. She lost her back handspring. She lost her tuck. And she was like, and it was because her core was atrophying, which I didn't know was a thing in bracing. But yeah, her core had atrophied so much that she was losing skills. And it was just like, even like the heat rash, the everything, it was just too much after that long. And so we go in and we're like, look, at this point, she's dropped down to almost 5 hours a day, and my kid's ready to quit bracing. Like, she's wanting to throw in the towel. And she was only like 11, I think. And the doctor was like, okay, that's a problem. So if you quit now, you're basically signing yourself off to surgery because your skeletal maturity is still so low. I really think this is going to progress. And so he said, before you throw in the towel on bracing, there's this new kind of brace that's in study. There's no research. There's really hardly any research on it. This is, how they're starting it. But I really think that it could address a lot of the issues that you're struggling with. Would you be willing to try it? And I was instantly like, well, if we're just gonna let it go and go to surgery, which terrified me, or try something else first, let's try something else first. And she agreed to it. And that picture that you saw there was the first moment that she got her brace, her whisper, and it still like makes me cry to this day because that was the first time I had actually seen her like laugh and giggle in like at least in a brace in at least a year. And I was like, oh my gosh. And she was like, doing this and that side, and she was like, oh my gosh, and I was just in tears because I could not believe it. And then I'm looking at the x-rays, and it is actually doing what it's supposed to be doing while she was still wearing it. So it was pretty incredible. So fast forward a little bit of time, very quickly her core strength came back. She was able to get back to competitive cheer very fast. And it was comfortable enough that she was able to wear it almost 4 years until she was released from bracing. And her curves were smaller than when she started. And so that's a whole thing. My only like one of my big regrets is that the doctor released her at a 7A. And I really wanted her to stay in a brace until a Sanders 7B, but when he said, like, you can stop, it had been almost 7 years, and I couldn't, in good conscience, like, feel like I could push her anymore, But I was like, dang, you did it. You fought the good fight, and you worked so hard, and frankly, so did I. But yeah, so it's really weird to be on the other side of that now, but yeah. That's our journey. I learned how to advocate for myself and teach her how to speak up for herself, too.
So, let me add a little color on that. So, any part that ever could have broken on the Whisper broke with her daughter's brace. And I am very grateful to her because it was like, here's our FedEx number, drop it off at FedEx. It's shipped to us, we fixed it, sent it back. and then whatever the next part that could have broken, or like there's been like 8 different versions, and I'll bet that young lady's responsible for finding the challenges in 7 of them or so.
But they fixed them all like so fast. It was amazing. Yeah.
Wow, it was like, oh God, that poor kid, like, got to get it back. The other thing I would say, she was such a good advocate, and we had our own heat sensor and a monitor and that, and I could tell when our software wasn't working before any engineer, because I got pinged by Katherine, like, hey, did she hit her hours today? And one of the things she did was she related her daughter's phone time to her brace compliance.
Yeah, her hours on her phone were tied to, or whatever social media thing it was, were tied to her bracing hours, and that was a big motivator. When she was struggling. We went back to that, yeah.
So, anyway, Tammy.
My story is
Oh, hang on one second.
Just come over and push all the buttons. Just push all of them.
well, that might be easier. Yes, we'll just do that. So my name's Tammy Uchtuk. My daughter is Suetta Uchtuk. You've probably seen her on the Whisper Brace poster. She hates that picture. I took it. I apologize. But our story is much different. So COVID happened, and we skipped a well check because we were just like, it's okay. We'll stay home. So it was April of 2021 to take Suetta, 13 years old, to her well check because we had skipped her 12-year. Did the bend test, said, that's interesting. Got the scoliometer, learned a lot of things about that. Said, oh, she's at 8 degrees. Let's wait for 6 months. So we waited 6 months. We come back. There's a little scoliometer. Oh, we're at 12 degrees. I'm going to refer you now to an orthotist. Mind you, this is my pediatrician that was in the hospital when my oldest, who is now 21, was born. So I trust this woman with my children. I've trusted her for a long time. She's telling me it's 12 degrees. I'm like, okay, it's mild. We're good. We're in a good place. Go get the x-ray, see the orthopedic surgeon. Orthopedic surgeon says, she's got some big curves. She's at 35, 48. And mind you, Sweat and I went in thinking 12 degrees, not a whole lot. We got this, we can do this. So I see my daughter literally melt. And I'm just like, nope, I'm not gonna do that to her. I'm like, okay, we still got this. We're good. He says, here's a prescription, get the Boston brace, here you go. Wasn't the best experience. His staff took her measurements with her shoes on. They weren't very caring, they didn't talk to her. I wasn't happy. So that's when Google Mom came out. And this was November of 21. So pretty soon, right? So I'm doing my Google search and I come across a video. And it's Jamie and Matt, the founders of Green Sun Medical, being interviewed by Dr. Derek Lee. Maybe you guys know him, he's a chiropractor in Canada, does these great YouTube videos with surgeons and stuff. And it's all about the Whisper Brace. And I said, that's what I need. And I had Sweta sit down and watch the video, and we see Emmy doing her bends, and Sweta's like, that's what I need, because at 48 degrees, what are you gonna do, right? So then I have my panic phone calls, and I apologize to Jamie every time I see him, because I probably called every single phone number that was on his website, because the really interesting thing is, I'm like, we're going wherever it's at. We're in Colorado. Wherever it's at, I'm taking her. I don't care what it costs. I'm going to do everything I can. Go through their website, go to the bottom, about us, where are we? Guess where they're at? Fort Collins, Colorado. Jamie's literally 7 miles away from me. So I probably left 5 different messages and maybe multiple different emails. And the very next day, I'm driving in my car, the phone rings, I see Jamie's name, I pick it up, I pull over, and he's like, we're gonna do this. He's like, I can't promise you because those are some big curves. I'm not making any promises, but we can definitely try. And he said, and I was like, that's all I'm asking is just to try, because the ultimate goal of bracing is just to maintain your curves and not progress, right? So I was like, okay, maybe if she's gonna need surgery, we're gonna be okay. It'll be not as big of a surgery if her curves had progressed. So I ended up getting on his website and finding a doctor in Colorado who happened to be cited on his website. And I was like, I'm going there. So we went to Children's, and in my mind, I'm like, it's the Whisper. That's what I'm doing. sat down with the doctor. The doctor's like, well, there's not much I can do for you, so we'll see you in 6 months and we'll probably be doing surgery. And I was like, well, actually, no, I don't think so. What about the whisper brace? And he's like, well, I mean, we can try, but with a 48-degree curve, bracing is likely, not successful. And I said, well, I'll do anything I can for Suetta to try. That's all I'm asking. I'm not expecting miracles. Let's just try. So Suetta's been bracing for 2.5 years. She's now weaning out of her brace, and her curves are now 32 and 35, so no longer in surgery range. So she is a rock star. I could say that I did all the things I needed to do, but I really didn't. I just have a kid who knew that she had big curves and knew that her time was limited, and she couldn't take any chances. She couldn't take the breaks in the brace. She couldn't risk being out of it because she knew that if she was out of it, she was going to have surgery, and she really wanted to do anything she could to not have surgery. It also really helps to have Jamie on speed dial. So when anything happens, or if I have any questions, the Green Sun medical team has, above and beyond, been amazing. Eric's an amazing orthotist, and I think that's what you need in your corner when you have a kid who's bracing, is an amazing orthotist. And they encourage Suetta and they empower her, and every time we see anybody from their care team, it's always been really great. We had one meeting, and this is a quick story, and I'm keeping it short here, Jamie.
You're
for
good.
you. We had this one meeting with Jeff, and so Suetta had really bad rotation, right? And so we went in, and the curves, her curves have been stable at 32, 35 for a while, but he said, he's like, I took your x-rays home, Suetta, because we're gonna work on your rotation. We're gonna do this. And Suetta has kept that with her, because she's like, somebody cares enough about me to take it out from work and take it home with them and say, I'm gonna figure out I'm gonna make this better for you. And they talk to her and they acknowledge her, and she's a part of the process. She loves the app. They call her and they're like, Suetta, what's going on with the app here? Can you check it out for her? So she's empowered. She's now looking towards going into the medical field because she wants to be an orthotist. Because she sees the power of having a great orthotist in her corner, and she wants to give back. So I encourage her. I love her. I always try to stay positive, and I try to, I keep my mouth shut when she has her appointments, because I'm like, could that hurt? Doesn't that hurt? And I'm like, that's not gonna help her, because maybe it doesn't hurt. Maybe in my eyes that looks like it hurts, but maybe it doesn't. So I keep my mouth shut and I let her, okay. And I just keep my mouth shut. She manages her care, but she's older. She's 16 now, so I know she can do that. So that's Suetta's story. She's my amazing golden child, and I feel so lucky. And we're weaning, and there are challenges to weaning, and there's fear. Is it gonna progress? Is it gonna bounce back? But we're staying positive, and we're hoping that she stays in the 30s and she can live her life with scoliosis and be a successful bracing story.
Yeah. So I have to add color to this one. Can you imagine? She lives a mile from my in-laws. Has a surgical range curve, right? Little panic factor, I'm gonna try, but I don't want to run into her at King Soopers and have this kid I had to get surgery. Thanks a lot for your brace. But she was another kid. If you ever see a Whisper and you see, we try to listen to the kids, there's straps in the front, and some of them have some pads, and she had a rib poking. And she's so sweet. Yeah, it's kind of bothering me a little bit. She's so, it was hurting her. And so we ended up doing this pad, and it helped. But she was really good. It's not just about the parents advocating. It's getting your child to advocate for themselves. If it's bothering them, let's address it, right? And I tell all of these kids as they're going through things, you're trying to straighten their torso. They're going to get a lot of pressure. They shouldn't have pain. Right? And getting them to communicate is probably the best thing you guys can do as parents, because you don't know, the orthotist doesn't know, the doctor doesn't know, they've got their next appointment coming. Getting them to speak, I think, is the best thing that you can do for them. And I think if Emmy didn't find something that broke, Sweata did. So like I was doing drive-bys there and fixing stuff. But I can tell you these kids we're gonna be successful because they had parents advocating, and they were advocating for themselves. It went from the parents to the kids, and they started taking care of themselves.
Can I just add something on that real quick? My daughter was the one who would it'd be a very long day for us in St. Louis because they try to get everything in one day. And she would make the brace, and we got home, and I think I called Jamie, this possibly happened twice, where I was like, I'm gonna kill this kid. We just spent all this time, and then we got home, and now she's like, well, this thing's been bothering me the whole time, but I just was really hungry, and I wanted to leave. And so then we learned, I was like, oh, for the love. Okay, so then we learned that, because they'll say about the one thing that's like screaming at them because they want to leave, right? They want to get out of there. So Eric taught me, we are not leaving here. What are the top 5 things that are bothering you? And I'm just like, and all I'm doing is keeping my mouth shut and counting. Like that's only 4. There's got to be one more thing that's bugging you. So, but making her speak up, and we are not leaving here until these 5 things are fixed. And yes, it took a while, but that got us a better fitting from the get-go. So you can do that with any kind of brace. The top 5 things that are bothering you, don't let them push you out after they fix like the top 1 thing, okay? So that's have the kid learn to speak up and come up with more things that are bothering them to get fixed.
And I think it's the only time I got upset with her. I'm like, you can't kill the kid that's on my website giggling, okay? Like, I know we gotta fly back, but please don't kill her. And Maureen has a great, unique story too.
Okay, mine works. That's exciting. So, I'm Maureen Hoff, and just to correct Jamie, I'm not the clubfoot mom, I'm a clubfoot mom, because I made sure that the podcast was generalized to everybody's experience. I don't think of myself as somebody special. Honestly, I'm just a parent who's trying to use their voice in order to help other parents and kids along the way. I won't tell you, obviously I'm not a scoliosis parent, so I'm not gonna go into the whole realm of clubfoot and our diagnosis, but just the snapshot was she was diagnosed in utero. Clubfoot is an orthopedic condition. It's the #1 birth defect outside of all congenital heart issues, and so she was diagnosed at 22 weeks, so we had the rest of our pregnancy to worry about everything else and also try to figure everything out. And then she went through something what we call the Ponseti method, which is where we do serial casting on her feet starting at 2 weeks old, and she had 7 casts, and they would switch every week, so they gently manipulate the foot into the correct position. She had 1 surgical procedure where they cut her Achilles completely and put the last cast on so it can regrow, because they're really short and tight, and having a flexible heel is really important for a functional foot. And then we moved into bracing, and so she was in what we call her boots and bar. She was bilateral, so it affected both of her feet, and she had to wear this little contraption for 23 hours a day for 3 months after she came out of cast, and then gradually decreased until just night and nap time wear until she was 5. So it was a different experience for me because she didn't have a voice. I was her voice. And so I had to ensure and step up to a role that honestly I was not good at. I wasn't meant to be an advocate. I never felt that way. I have 2 older typical children, and whatever the doctor said, I did. I didn't question it. I didn't research it. I was like, okay, cool. She's got strep. We're gonna give her this antibiotic. I wasn't like, okay, what antibiotic should we use, right? And so I had to really shift my mindset, but I think the advocating journey really started, and how I ended up connecting with Jamie was just about the Ponseti method. They say is one of the biggest shifts in modern medicine, because what they were doing before the Ponseti method, this casting and bracing, was they were reconstructing these babies' feet completely through surgery. And so we went from having a full surgical procedure, which is, has a recovery period, but then non-functional, very painful, non-mobile feet in adults. So they shifted completely from away from surgery to casting and bracing in like a 10-year period. And do you want to know why that shift happened? because of parents. Because parents in the internet, when it was like a Yahoo group, came about and was like, no surgery for clubfoot. And that propelled Dr. Ponsetti, who was based in Iowa at that point, out of retirement. Because all of these moms and parents decided, there's another way, and we're gonna push until we get that. So all of then these doctors had to shift. And I've had doctors on the podcast who will openly admit they loved clubfoot surgery because they were like, we got to reconstruct the whole foot. It was one of my favorite surgeries. But they knew that it wasn't what was best for kids. Now, you think, oh, well, nobody knew about Ponsetti before that. No, for 40 years, he'd been speaking at conferences in front of the medical community with peers, saying, presenting his research. Nobody listened. Well, I say nobody listened. It wasn't like the power of parents, right? So I had that example moving forward. And even I spend a portion, like the last portion of my book, just like thanking those parents because they pushed, and because they pushed, now my kid didn't have to go through that. And I'm so grateful, and so that's what really pushed me forward. So my advocating journey like really took a turn when we moved into Boots and Bar, and they literally sent me home with a medical device and was like, good luck, keep your baby happy. And I'm like, and if you don't, there's a 90% rate that you'll fail, that then she's gonna be back and have a relapse and then have to have a surgery. So good luck. There's no resources, no education, no support. I have no phone number to call to ask what am I supposed to do, but you know, if you fail, it's basically on you. So it was at that moment that I was like, why is there such a big gap? And why, as a parent who's now responsible for helping my child through this, there isn't enough resources for us? Why am I not being supported? Why is there not education available for me? And I'm like, this is the largest birth defect. Like, why is there not enough stuff for the people who are actually doing the work? So I ended up writing a book called Clubfoot Chronicles, which I partnered with the orthopedic company who makes the braces to publish, and it's for free. I sell it on Amazon, but the reality is, like, the whole point was just to give it away to parents who needed it, because that's what I needed, and I didn't have it, and so I spent that portion of her, I had to do it while she was still in it, while we were in the thick of it, because it was a really, really difficult transition for us to Boots and Bar. We all just struggled. I had 3 kids at home in the midst of summer and one very unhappy baby. And so trying to figure that all out and feeling super isolated, as I'm sure everybody feels, except for you guys are all here, and being able to connect, but feeling like I was the only one going through it. And so we published the book, and then I started my podcast, which was just another way. A quick insider note, I don't listen to my own episodes because I can't stand the sound of my voice. So I was like, had my brother is like he writes his own music and stuff. And so he was like, hey, I'll help you like just edit the audio quality and stuff. And I was like, awesome. Like, then I don't have to listen to it. And like, so it's funny, I think we have almost 100 episodes, and I maybe have listened to one. But it was just another resource that I wanted for parents. And then I moved into doing education and speaking at conferences, a lot to the medical community about like doctors and surgeons, about saying you're missing a big piece of the puzzle because you're not bringing parents into being partners in this team. And if you want to know why compliance is an issue or why parents are struggling or what we're struggling with, you have to ask them, and you have to bring them into the conversation and say, hey, you know your child better than anybody else. So how do we do that? How do we start to bridge that gap? So that was the goal of kind of my conversations with the medical community, and it's really just education about who the end user is in this, right? Like, so I say the end user, for us in particular, my baby wore it every night for 5 years. but I'm the one that put it on. I'm the one that made sure that she wore it adhered to the bracing schedule. I think I put her boots and bar on, I think at the end of it, 1,700 times. Like, it was a decision that we made. And so navigating that and listening to just even these moms talk about it, it's like doctors don't understand how much it overwhelms our entire lives. Like, I remember looking at my husband at one point and I'm like, is there ever gonna be 1 minute that I don't think about clubfoot? Well, now I work in clubfoot, so no. It's all the time, forever. But it's been, I really just believe in amplifying the parent voice and using your voice and trusting yourself, and advocacy looks different for everybody. So some people are really natural at it, and they're, just easy at pushing in through it. And then there are I love it. I have 3 girls at home, so this is a normal day for me. But other people are quieter, and you have to figure out what fits for you, and then you have to lean into that. But a big piece of it is just knowing that you are important, and if there are things that you don't feel right about, then it's probably not right. And that's okay, even if it's just a feeling. So when orthopediatrics opened their specialty bracing, they were like, hey, we really want you to come on and be the director of this. And I was like, so you know what you're getting with that, right? That means a lot of things I'm gonna say are just because they're how I feel. And how I feel, I've learned, is really important. And so if you're looking for someone who's gonna wanna sell things and do that, that's not, I'm gonna tell you, this is what feels good, and this is what feels right for me and for parents. And if you want to know what is wrong with your products, just ask parents, because they'll tell you, right? And, but that's really my role is now with orthopediatric specialty bracing, is just to start to gather and amplify those voices. And my daughter just got to be in a little commercial, so I spent my whole time trying to keep her private, right? I didn't use her name in any of the podcast or any of the book. I put her face on the cover, but I wasn't any social media. I was really trying to just maintain that space for her to tell her story, because this is my story. But then they were like, she really wanted to be in a video. So now she's in a video with her sisters, and she named it. She was like, my sister's names are in it, but mine's not, so it's called Alma's Story. And it's on all of our Instagram stuff, so now she thinks she's a star. And honestly, she is. She can do everything, and I get to watch. And I'm like, there's a moment, as you guys all feel, watching my kid take her first steps was unlike anything that I'd ever experienced, because we worked, not just her, but we worked so hard for that. And so those little things in life that you took for granted with your other kids, that you're like, wow, bending over to pick up a pencil, right? You're like, these things that don't seem like a big deal just bring so much more joy than what you'd ever expected. So.
Wow.
Hey, Jamie. I just wanted to say that talking to her kind of brought together some things for me when I first talked to her about part of the thing that she learned and that I learned along the way, and I didn't realize I learned it, was I learned to trust my gut as a parent. If you feel like something is not right, you're probably right. So if the doctor dismisses you when you bring it up, that should be a red flag. And it's okay to go get a second opinion. And you don't have to ask permission to go get a second opinion about that thing. And if you're not the person who is comfortable pushing back when the doctor says something, your way of advocating might be, hey kiddo, what's our biggest roadblock to you being able to wear this brace? What is it? I would have thought at one point that it was because my daughter didn't like the way she looked in it, But it was because at that time she felt super constricted and she felt like she was being controlled. She doesn't like to be controlled now, but like she felt like she was like physically being controlled and she couldn't move. And so so it's like, okay, so here's the top 2 roadblocks that my kids brought up to me. How can I figure out how to, so how do we remove those roadblocks? Okay, you email the roadblock. You can email the roadblocks to the doctor and the orthotist. Email it to him. Hey, these are the 2 things that she says are causing her issues to not be able to wear her brace. How can we fix this? How can we improve this for her? Even if that's the way you choose to go from it, rather than like pushing back to the doctor face to face, advocating for your kid looks like all different things, okay? And when you're asking them, be specific about what it is that's bothering you, that teaches them that it's okay to get specific and think about it and speak up for themselves. And then when they get in front of the doctor, have them say it again. As much as you can, have your kid do this speaking so that they can learn to advocate for themselves. And that's one of the things that I think is kind of awesome about our journey as opposed to you. Your child couldn't speak up for herself during that time, so you had to do all the talking. We get to teach them a life skill of learning to speak up when something's not right and to stand up for themselves in a positive, strong way. So I think that's kind of an awesome thing that we can teach them just by bringing the conversation back to them and being like, okay, so what do you think? Do you understand all of that? What part didn't you understand in front of the doctor? And then so it teaches them to ask. So little things like that, all of that is advocacy that we are doing for our kids, and then we are teaching them to do for themselves. So it's a life skill.
Great point. One thing I want to touch on, they said, I want you guys all to think about this. You are healthcare consumers, okay? It's your decision at the end of the day, whatever treatments you're doing in that, you should value that, and they should value that. If they don't look at you as a customer and a consumer, they should, because you can go somewhere else. You guys should advocate for yourself. Like they say, if it doesn't feel right, try and go somewhere else. Sometimes it's rural areas, and she drove 5 hours to appointments just because she wanted to advocate for her daughter and do something different. You guys have much more power in this decision process than some of you realize, and I hope you take advantage of that. And the other thing is, something that's going on right now in this room, like you look around, there is a power in the numbers of these parents right now. Even these 2 doctors that spoke yesterday said, we've got to study kind of weaning off bracing. We don't really do enough of that, and we don't do this. As this group grows and gets bigger, we're going to need parents to be more active, reaching out to Congress and things like that to improve the overall scoliosis treatment. There are some great clinicians in this room, but it's not everywhere. And same thing with doctors. There's some great ones and there's some other ones that aren't. The more we advocate also together to improve care, it's going to help all of this. Rising tide raises all boats, and we have that power. We have so much more power. Both of those doctors yesterday were blown away at seeing this audience, the questions you were asking, and some of the treatment some people have received, and they didn't necessarily have it like that at their institution, and they were like, wow, we really have to improve the overall care, and they recognize the power that this group has to do that. So at that point, let's open it up to questions, because these are rock stars here. So who's got some questions? And I'll walk them out. Somebody, come on.
While we're waiting, I will say one thing that you all sitting in this room can do right now. I know that my daughter felt very lonely for years because she hadn't met any other kids with scoliosis, and I would ask our doctor and even our orthotist at the time, like, how do we meet other kids? How do I find her a way to connect with other kids? And they would be like, I don't know, there was this one group they mentioned, but the chapter near us was defunct. Every one of you right now knows about something that I bet at least your doctor or your orthotist does not know about, which is Higgy Bear's Higgy Con, okay? And they have Higgy friends. Go home and tell your doctor and your orthotist and your Schroth therapist, everyone on your team about this so that they can tell other kids when their parents ask about this resource so that they connect their kids through your kids can be connected to others. That's how it grows, and that's one of the ways that we can make a difference with just one little conversation to help other kids. Sorry.
No, I wanted to say thank you. All of your stories were so inspiring, And I've cried a lot since I've been here, and I cried more in listening to your stories, both just empathy for what we're all going through, and also all the things that I've sort of beaten myself up for of what I could have done differently or been a better advocate. And we're still very early. My daughter just started bracing in October, but when we first went to the orthotist, who is in a strip mall in Santa Rosa and had prosthetic legs hanging everywhere, and we got her braced, and it was 2 weeks later when I thought, I don't even know what kind of brace she has. Yeah. And I didn't know how much I didn't know. Yeah. And so as I'm learning more and realizing I got to step up my game and be a better advocate for my daughter and teach her to be a better advocate. So really I wanted to say thank you. But I also wanted to ask, and you just brought up Schroth, is just what else you are doing besides the bracing, because that's been a challenge for us too, because there's nothing nearby and you can't really do it online. And so I'd just love to know what else you are doing besides the bracing that has had an impact.
So Sweta did do Schroth for 2 years, and that was successful, but Schroth is hard, and you heard that. And I think she started to just dial it in with her exercises and wasn't doing them to their full capacity. So now she's doing regular physical therapy, but you need to find a physical therapist who understands scoliosis, because otherwise you run the risk of them building up the wrong muscles, right? So we found a physical therapist. She's only working on one side of Sweta's body, and she's working on her core strength, because as she's weaning, we're realizing she needs core strength. But one quick thing I wanted to say, and I've said this a couple times this weekend, is we make the best decisions for our children with the information that we have. Yeah. We have to be kind to ourselves and understand that you can't second guess the decisions you make for your child, whether that's surgery or bracing or not bracing or physical therapy or whatever. So as parents, as caregivers for our children, we have to be kind to ourselves and try to let go some of that guilt, because I constantly wonder, would it have been better for her to have surgery, right, with a 48-degree curve? I can't do that to myself, and I can't do that to her. I gotta be proud of the decisions that we've made and confident that we've made the best decisions we can with the information that we have.
Hi, I'm Erica. Just wanted to thank everyone for sharing their stories. And it really helps a lot to just bring everyone together and get to meet each other and make new connections. I wanted to also say something about the guilt thing too, because I don't feel guilt, and I would say that, like she was saying, give yourself space, give yourself grace, because you're doing the best you can. As long as you're doing the best you can, that's not all you can do, that's what you're doing, you know, and the more you know, the easier it gets. The more education you have, the easier it is, you know, and nobody makes the right choices all the time, but I love how the kids are involved and the parents are involved. When I was young going through scoliosis, my mother said, they're gonna cut you down your back and put a rod in. I did not know until last year when we came that I actually had a spinal fusion, because that was never said. So I just kind of figured that out last year. So, so things have really changed, and I love it. And as far as advocacy goes, the more you do it, your kids learn from you. You don't even have to tell them what to do. They know what to do because they're watching you. They're trusting you, and if you make a wrong decision, you'll figure it out and do better. The more you learn, the better you get. And also wanted to say, I am heading the Higgy Friends in Bowie, Maryland area. So yeah, so we have some new friends that will be joining. So if you're not in a group, find a group, or you can start a group. It's not hard, and it's fun. We just go out for fun. There's no scoliosis talk, and you know, unless they want to, but we go have fun. So, and thanks again.
I wanted to say too that, like, we call it the mom guilt, but they're dad guilt too, right? I say mom guilt because I am a mom, but the mom guilt is real, and it can be everything from I didn't catch it sooner, you know, to I messed up and I went to this person and we did unnamed therapy instead of something else. But my thing is that don't beat yourself up over the mistakes. We've all made mistakes in parenting, every one of us, right? Don't beat yourself up over these mistakes that have to do with, the scoliosis journey, because you learned from it. Looking back, you learned from it, then you probably educated the heck out of yourself on it. You're able to help somebody else who had that problem, and you were able to better guide your child's care from the future because of that mistake that you made, right? That you learned from. So don't get too hung up on, I should have done this, because we can all say that looking back, but think about the ripples that it had that were positive, not just the negatives. Think about the positive things and how that guided you moving forward. That's what you hold on to. So.
That's great. One more. Yeah, just yell it.
I can yell it out.
Yell it out.
So, thank you so much, everybody, and for sharing your story. I got really emotional when it comes to the guilt part because I feel everybody's probably thinking the same way right now. My question is, at what point do you see your child's bruises that you feel like, okay, maybe this brace is not enough. Maybe I need to change it. I'm so sorry.
That's a tough one. It is tough. We don't like to see our kids in pain. Anytime, we've been lucky where we've just had slight red spots and bruises, but immediately, as soon as my daughter says something's wrong, I feed that back to her doctor. What can we do to fix this now? And if I have to take the brace off her for a few days and she feels better, a few days or a week isn't going to make it that much worse. You're going to be fine. Give breaks when breaks are deserved, and don't beat up on yourself for, oh no, she had it off for a week until we got this adjustment made. What did I do to her or him? Because sometimes the overall well-being is better than forcing the child to wear it in pain for another week. So listen to the child, do what you can. You can't beat yourself up for them getting bruises or red spots for it, because you know that is still better than the pain that they might have from a surgery or chronic back pain or something else. It is hard though. Gosh, nobody wants to see their kid in pain, but the pain is for a better, brighter future without pain, hopefully. But give yourself grace, give your child grace. There were times last week where it wasn't feeling good or all of these different things, and we had very low brace hours last week. But overall, she does very good with it. So give breaks when breaks are needed, and don't beat yourself up for giving a break. It's okay. They'll be all right.
And I would also say, I wouldn't think that they would normally be having, as much of the bruising after that break-in period, after their body has had a chance to adjust. In some kids, their bodies take a little bit longer. I would say, as a mom, though, I am probably one of the more annoying ones, because I got to the point where I knew that so many things, if I just called and took her in, was like a really quick fix. And then we were able to move on. And so I kind of learned that if I saw this was a problem more than just one day, right, give it a few days, and then I would call and be like, Eric, this was our orthopedist over here. Eric, we need to come see you. We go back in, and the orthotists, they're usually very good about getting you in as soon as possible when you're saying, look, we've got a problem and it's affecting my kid's ability to wear it. One thing I learned is that if I let something go too long, then she would get out of the habit of wearing it. And that is one thing that is really helpful, is to have a consistent, now when they're sick and puking and, no, let them have a break. But don't feel bad calling the orthotist again, because you know what? They want to make the brace as effectively comfortable as your kid can tolerate, right? And he really cranked on my kiddo, because as much as she could handle it, and yeah, there was bruising at first and stuff, her body did adjust to it. But if it becomes a chronic thing, don't, even past that, if it's affecting your child's ability to wear the brace and tolerate it well, call the orthotist. They don't want your kid in pain and not able to wear the brace. The brace cannot help your kid if it's on the floor, because it's hurting and it's pressing bruised areas that have been there for, weeks, and they won't go away. So call the orthotist, and don't feel bad about it.
No, and they
Right.
want you to. They want to be able to, if you're wearing like a Boston or something like that, shave it down, add more padding, tweak this, tweak that. They don't want your kid in pain. So if you're getting it's normal at first when they've never worn one, but it's not normal after they're in it. So always just say something. You can always add more padding and still get an effective brace.
And I'm just gonna say, trust your intuition. Like I know I don't do that with, I know I don't have the scoliosis, but I hear this a lot with parents who are in boots and bar, and their babies cannot tell them if they are in pain. But we are trying to constantly guess whether they are. And so that's where, and also I'm gonna say a caveat to this trust your intuition thing. I'm also a very anxious mom, and I think my anxiety has propelled me a lot through everything. Like it's really pushed me to be like, okay, yes, I'm gonna figure all this out, right? So that anxiety I've been grateful for, but trying to navigate whether or not I'm being overly anxious or whether this really is something that I need to deal with. I think if you listen to yourself and go, this doesn't feel right, then that's okay for you. That's enough of a reason for you to go, okay, if this doesn't feel good, I need you to do something about it or explain it to me.
And the one thing we live by is pressure, not pain. Pressure, not pain. When Suetta started having pain, I knew something had changed. Our kids are growing, especially our young girls, and their bodies are changing. And once there started to be pain, we made an appointment, they made some changes, her face immediately was like, oh. So trust yourself.
It's amazing, whatever brace, sometimes just a little tiny flare, heating it up and bending it a little bit, and you see their face like, oh, I can do it now, thank you. So don't hesitate to do that. I hate to cut it short, but we are actually a little bit over. We're gonna start back up at 3 o'clock, and we actually have our next panel is a couple of their daughters and a bunch of other young ladies who have been through bracing, and they're all like 15, 16. And there's some of our group leaders also. So they're gonna share kind of their best practices or what helped them get all the way through.
Thank you.
Nice job.